everybody, and welcome back to yet another video in our book tracker application series. So in this series, we've been putting together a bunch of different Jetpack libraries and seeing how we can use all of these different parts to create a little more complicated and useful app. So in the past couple of videos, we've been talking about clean architecture. And in the first video on clean architecture, we discussed use cases and how we can encapsulate our business logic into these use cases here. And then after that, in the next video, we talked about what we called our domain model, which in this case is our book class. And this is how we can store and use our data internally in our application. And then now in this video, we're going to talk about our package structure. And basically, this whole project window right now is just a mess because we have this list of 20 some files that we need to basically we want to organize these based on what layer they're going to be in according to our clean architecture diagram. And that'll just be a lot easier to work with that moving forward. And then it's also going to promote reusability of our code. Even for a small app like ours, like the one we've been building here, this is quickly becoming unmanageable in this project window. And this is all only for just one feature of the project. So you can imagine as a project grows, if we continue putting files in here, this is going to be totally overwhelming. So we don't want to do that. We need more manageable packages. And when I say packages, I mean like here, example, book tracker, all of these directories in your project window, those are all referred to as packages. So if I go to the top of any file, it's going to tell you the package location of that file. So basically what we're going to do, we have this diagram that we've been building. And in our diagram, you can see we have our presentation layer, and then we have our domain layer, and we have our data layer. And we've spent the past couple videos separating each file out into one of these layers. So what I'm going to do is in here, we're going to have a package for our presentation layer, our data layer, and then our domain layer. And we're going to put all of these different files into their appropriate package. So let's get started doing that. First, I'm going to create another top level package under book tracker. And this package is basically going to be for our feature here, which is our book tracker feature. So if we go to new, we go to package, I'm just going to call this one books. And then under books, I'm going to add 3 new packages. So new package, and the first one is going to be data, new package, and then the second one is going to be domain, and then books, new package, and then the third one is going to be presentation. And these, again, are just matching those layers that we had in that diagram. Now, if we come down here and we try to figure out which file goes in what, let's start with domain. So if you think about our domain layer, which we just defined 2 videos ago, and then we added our domain model, which is our book class, and then our use cases to that. So I'm going to grab all of my use cases and then my book class, and I'm going to drag those into my domain package and click refactor. Now all of those show up in my domain. So next, what we need to do, let's go ahead and look at our presentation layer. So for our presentation layer, we've got our books screen, our state, and our view model. And then we also have our book details screen, our book details screen, state, and view model as well. So I'm going to take all of those and drag those into my presentation layer. But we're not quite done with that. It's actually our main activity, if you remember, our main activity has composables in that as well. So I'm going to put my main activity into my presentation layer as well. Now, after that, our data layer should be everything else. So within the data layer, we're going to have our book mapper. We're going to have our local book and then also our remote book. Those are the classes that we created for interacting with books in our database and then books from our HTTP call for Firebase. And then our API, obviously, our data access object, our database, and then both repositories. And finally, this partial local book, that is also going to be a data class that we use within the data layer. So let's take all of that and we're going to drag those all into data. Hit OK on that. Okay, so now we have everything in our data class, or everything related to data is now within our data layer, and then everything related to our domain is within our books layer, and then everything related to our domain is in our domain layer, and everything related to presentation is in our presentation layer. Already you can tell that this is just a lot better, miles better. But there's one more thing that we're going to need to update here. Basically, when we moved our main activity, if you go up and look in your app manifest Android and open up your Android manifest, you look in here, there's actually a reference to that main activity. So here in newer versions of Android Studio, this should update automatically. Before, this used to say name equals dot main activity, and now it says name equals dot books dot presentation dot main activity. So just go into your Android manifest file and definitely make sure that yours updated as well. Our organization is a little bit better in our project window over here. We still need to go a little farther. So what I'm going to do is in presentation layer, I'm going to add two more packages in here. So right click new package, and I'm going to name these essentially in our presentation layer. We have two screens. We have our book list, and then we have an individual book details. So I'm going to have one package for each of those. So I'm going to add book list and then a new package. And then this one is going to be called book details. Now in here, pretty much anything related to book details, I'm just going to move into that book details package. And then everything related to book screen, that book list, I'm going to move into my book list package. And now that's even organized better because we have a presentation layer and then we have each screen that we have within that presentation layer. So we're done with that one. Now in our domain layer, we have two different pieces of data here, right? We have our domain model. So in here, I'm going to do new package, and then I'm going to name this package model, and we'll put our domain model in there. And in this case, we only have one, but obviously in any application, you can have more than one piece of data that you're working with. And then right click, new package, and this one is going to be use case. We're going to stick all of our use cases in that use case package. And then now up in our data package, we have a couple different things going on here. We have our repositories. We have our two repositories. So I'm going to do new, right click, new package, and I'm going to call this one repo. And then I'm going to stick both of our repositories in that repo package. And then we also have we have two different DTOs here, right? We have our local book, and then we have our remote book. So what I'm going to do again in here, data, right click, new package, and one is going to be local. And we're going to stick our local book DTO in there. And then new package, and then one is going to be remote. And I'm going to go ahead and stick my remote book in there. Okay, now we have our mapper. So I'm going to do new package, and we're going to have a mapper package. And in this case, we only have one file with all of our mappers in it, but that's fine. Sometimes you can have more depending on how many different entities you have and data pieces you have. Next down here, if you look, we've got our Books API, which that's obviously our interface with our remote Firebase database online. So we're going to stick that one in my remote package here. And then we have our books data access object, our DAO, our books database, and then this partial local finished book. You'll remember, and you'll see here that we're using this with our room database. So this is a local data entity. So I'm going to go ahead and grab all of these and stick them back into our local package here, and then click refactor on that. So now, if you look at our package organization here, you've got your, well, first, you've got your root level here, and you've got our application. And then in here, we have our books feature. And then inside of our books feature, you've got your data. and then you've got your domain, and you've got your presentation. And in the presentation, we've got one package for each screen that we have. In our domain, we've got a package for our use cases, and then for our models. In this case, we only have one. And then up in our data layer, we have our repository package, we have our remote package for remote data access from Firebase, and then we have our mappers for going back and forth between our local book, our remote book, and then our actual book domain model class that we use within our application. And then finally, we have our local, which has all of our room stuff, and then our room entities as well. So this is actually much better organization now. It's organization. Before we had no organization at all. So now that we have everything neatly organized into files, we don't have just one big long list of files here. We have everything neatly organized into packages. You'll notice here we have our application and we put that above the books package. And that's because this books package is for one specific feature of this application. But if we wanted to add a new application here, a new feature, all we would do is add new, and then we would add package feature 2. And then inside feature 2, you would add again packages for data, domain, and presentation, and then any logic and any code that goes along with that. But we're not adding a second feature right now, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So there's one more thing that I want to cover in this video before we come to an end here, and that's going to be if you look in our presentation layer, so go books, presentation, and then let's go ahead and look just in our books list. If we open up our book screen, you can see that we have a reference to our ViewModel in here, and we're using that to pull the state. And that's okay, except if you look in that ViewModel, well, now this ViewModel has our use cases, and those use cases have references to our repository. And basically, anytime I create this book screen, it's going to create my ViewModel, which will then create my repository, which will then do a HTTP call to get a list of books from our Firebase database. Now, if we're just running this application, that's not a problem because every time we create this, we want to get that list. But if I'm doing testing and I'm creating this hundreds or even thousands of times to do my automated unit testing on this, well, then this is going to greatly decrease my performance. So what we need to do is we need to decouple this composable from that repository and from the view model that's eventually doing that network call. So to fix that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and delete this state in the view model. Then I'm actually going to add a few parameters up here. So instead of just having on item click, I'm going to have a state that's coming in. And that's going to be books screen state. And then I'm going to add another callback function as a parameter as well. And that's going to be on finished click. And it's going to look just like this. And basically down here, all we need to do, we need to change this on finished click equals ID view model toggle finished ID. And this needs to actually be basically that new callback that we just added as a parameter. So this just needs to be on finished click ID. And that's all we need to do in that file. Now let's go back to our main activity. And you'll notice here that we've actually introduced a new error down on our book screen. And that's, of course, because we added parameters that now essentially we're not passing those in. So up here, just above book screen, I'm going to add a new variable for my view model. And that's going to be of type books view model. And I'm simply going to set that equal to view model. Go ahead and import that. Now down here within books, I need to pass it my 3 parameters. So the first one is going to be just my state, and that's just going to be viewModel.state.value. The second one is just going to be this this navigation lambda that we have down here for the on item click. So we're simply going to set on item click and set it equal to that lambda block that we just copied, or that we just cut rather. And then finally we have our on finished click. And that one is also going to be a Lambda block. We're going to say ID, and we are going to do ViewModel dot toggle finished, and then ID. So now this is everything we need up there, but you'll notice we still have one error down here in our preview because we need to pass some data in here as well. So basically, let's pass the parameters in there as well. And we're going to say book screen state, and we're just going to pass an empty list here, and then false. And then after that, we need to pass our Lambda functions. So I'm just going to pass an empty one, and then again, an empty one. Okay, so there we go. That's it. Pretty simple. We've now decoupled our UI from our view model so that we run our tests. We're not going to have to do that network call every time. And we've done that in book lists, but now we need to go ahead into our book details screen and do that as well. So basically, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find our view model and our state, and we're going to delete both of those. And then after that, we get a bunch of errors, of course, because now we're using that state that we no longer pass in. So I need to pass that state in as a parameter. So up here, we're going to do state, and it's going to be a book details screen state. And then after that, this one's actually a little bit easier because there's no callback function required for anything. So we're done in this file, come back over to main activity. Basically, all we're going to need to do is simply add our state value as well. But to do that, we need a view model. So val view model, and that's going to be of type book details view model. Set that equal to the view model. And then in here, all we need to do is view model dot state dot value. And that should fix everything. So now if I go ahead and run my program, I've got both of those UIs now decoupled from my view models, which means functionally, when I run this thing, everything should work just like it did before. But later on, when we go for testing, we aren't going to need to worry about our app doing a network call every single time we change something. So this is a lot better, a lot cleaner. We've got it much more organized in our project window, and our app still behaves exactly like we expect it to. No issues with any of that. And there you have it. So this has been a pretty basic intro to clean architecture in Android. And basically, this is going to make our app much more scalable moving forward. Even now, it's much more organized and easier to quickly visualize where the different pieces of the app should fit into our diagram. And this is going to be much easier to test down the line. So this is a much better structure for our application that we previously had. So going forward, we're going to continue using clean architecture with everything, and this has again been a pretty basic introduction. Obviously, you could talk about this topic for quite a long time. Many books and articles and blogs have been written about clean architecture, and it's a very vast topic. So this is just a basic introduction to that. But hopefully, you found this helpful. If you have, definitely like this video and then subscribe to this channel for future content that we're going to continue to put out. In the next video, we're going to talk about something called dependency injection. And this is going to be, again, another thing that's very common in industry level applications. And then after that, we're going to briefly talk about testing our application. So you don't want to miss that. Subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next video.